In September 1622, in the heart of the Caribbean Sea, there was a massive Spanish ship carrying on board gold, silver, and jewels, in quantities no ship of its time had ever carried before. That ship sank with everything on it, along with a fortune now valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. For many years, no one was able to find any trace of it, until we reached the 20th century, and the American Mel Fisher was born. A man who decided to devote his entire life to searching for the ship Atocha. Some people thought he was crazy. Others believed he was chasing nothing but a mirage. But Fisher was convinced that one day would come when he would find the treasure that would write his name into history in the biggest way possible. Welcome. And today, let me tell you the story of the search for the treasure of the Atocha. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and activate notifications so you receive alerts for new stories as soon as they are released. And I want you to get this video to 2,000 likes before the next one. On September 4th, 1622, in the port of Havana in Cuba, a Spanish fleet made up of 28 ships was preparing to begin the return journey to Spain. Among those ships was Nuestra Señora de Atocha, a huge and powerful vessel armed with 20 bronze cannons. Its mission was to protect the entire fleet from the rear. On board were 265 people, including clergy, soldiers, and merchants with their families, all carrying their dreams of returning home, in addition to the treasure the Atocha carried. 40 tons of silver and gold, more than 900 silver and gold bars, chests filled with coins, and massive quantities of rare Colombian emeralds that had been smuggled aboard. You could say the ship was a floating vault on the surface of the sea. The value of the treasure it carried today exceeds $500 million. The fleet set sail and began its journey. But in less than 2 days, specifically on September 5th, a violent hurricane struck the fleet with tremendous force. The massive ships were tossed around like straw in a raging sea. Even the Atocha, the strongest ship among them, had its rudder broken, and the captain lost control. The winds pushed it toward the coral reefs until the ship shattered and sank, along with the legendary treasure and all the souls on board. Out of the 265 people, only 5 survived, clinging to the ship's stern mast, the only part that remained visible above the water. Just 1 month later, 2 even stronger hurricanes destroyed what remained of the ship's structure, and from that moment, the legend of the Atocha began. The greatest sunken treasure in the world's oceans. The incident passed with all its tragedy, and century after century went by until we reached the 1930s. Mel Fisher, as a young boy, was obsessed with stories of pirates and treasure, especially treasure lost beneath the sea. He spent most of his time in libraries reading about legendary Spanish ships, including, of course, the Atocha, and dreaming that one day he would find one of them. But diving at the time was extremely complicated and expensive. Diving equipment was massive and very costly, which made Mel's idea as a child closer to the fantasy of a dreaming boy. Even so, when Mel Fisher was only 12 years old, he decided to take his first real step toward his dream. He built his own diving helmet using a large bucket, cut an opening in it, fitted a piece of glass, and connected it to a hose that reached the surface, where his friend stood pumping air using a bicycle pump. Although he succeeded in diving for several minutes, the air eventually ran out and he nearly drowned. Instead of frightening him, the incident strengthened his determination and made him ready to do anything to achieve his dream, even if the price was risking his life. In the early 1950s, the child who dreamed of pirate treasure grew up and began working in poultry farming. The dream of sunken treasure felt very far from the reality of his daily life, until one day he heard about a new invention called scuba, or self-contained underwater breathing equipment. This invention was a revolution in the world of diving, allowing anyone to dive freely without complicated and expensive gear. For Mel, this was the signal he had been waiting for. In 1953, without hesitation, he sold his chicken farm and, together with his wife, opened the first dive shop and diving school in California. He began organizing exploration trips to search for treasure at famous shipwreck sites, and his addiction to hunting sunken treasure returned stronger than ever. The problem was that Mel lived on the west coast of the United States in California, while the regions famous for shipwrecks were on the east coast in Florida and the Caribbean. Due to geography and hurricanes, this area had become a graveyard for Spanish ships that regularly carried treasure from South America. For Mel to reach the treasure he dreamed of, he had to leave everything in his life behind and move completely from west to east. At the beginning of the 1960s, something happened that turned the entire east coast of the United States upside down, especially Florida. A gold rush. People were walking along the beaches and finding old Spanish gold and silver coins more than 300 years old. Shortly after, It was discovered that these coins came from a massive Spanish treasure fleet that sank in 1715 off the coast of Vero Beach. Since diving anywhere freely required a license, and Mel Fisher had already become known as a professional treasure hunter, the license holder of the area offered Mel a deal. Mel could dive, and whatever he recovered would be split 50-50. For Mel, this was the opportunity of a lifetime to turn his passion into his main profession. But it meant selling everything he owned, taking his wife and 4 children, and moving 4,200 kilometers away from the place where they had lived their entire lives. Despite that, in 1963, Mel decided to take the risk. He would go for 1 year only. Either he would find the treasure or return with nothing. He gathered a team of friends who believed in his passion and agreed to work with him for free for 1 year, hoping they would find a treasure that would change their lives forever. When Mel Fisher arrived in Florida in 1963, he brought with him technology that had never been used this way in treasure hunting before. One of his team members, an electronics expert, developed a compact version of a device used during World War II called a magnetometer, which had been used to detect submarines. The device included a sensor submerged underwater that could detect metals. Mel was convinced this device would be the key to discovering shipwrecks. Unfortunately, the first months of searching were extremely frustrating. The device worked perfectly and constantly gave signals, but when divers went down to check the source, the water at depth was so murky they couldn't even see their own hands. Searching was impossible, and Mel gradually began to feel that the dream might end before it even began. Then one day, an idea struck him. The water near the surface was clear. Only the deeper water was murky. Why not push the clear water down? He designed massive steel pipes mounted on the back of the boat to direct the powerful water flow from the propellers toward the seabed. The idea worked brilliantly. The water at the bottom became clear, allowing divers to see properly. The bigger surprise was that the device had a second unexpected function. The strong water flow dug deep holes in the sand, reaching depths of up to 1.8 meters. Work that once took months could now be done in a single day. Mel had changed the rules of the game. After his invention, Mel was sure that reaching treasure was only a matter of time. Day after day, he dug hole after hole in the seabed with his team. At first, enthusiasm was sky high, but weeks turned into months with no trace of treasure. Every hole was empty, just sand and mud. The 1-year deadline Mel set for himself was nearly over. After 11 months of hard work, all he had left was a huge hole in his bank account. The money was almost gone, but he remained optimistic, motivating the team every day. On day 360, just as they were about to give up, they dug a new hole and were shocked to find it filled with Spanish gold coins. One diver described the scene by saying the seabed was paved with gold. The treasure consisted of 1,033 gold coins, the largest treasure recovered at that time. From that moment on, Mel and his team decided no one was going back to California. They permanently moved to Florida, and over the next 7 years they continued working on the wreck of the 1715 fleet. Mel Fisher became one of the most famous treasure hunters in the world. After this massive success, Mel could have retired and enjoyed his wealth, but instead his eyes turned to the biggest prize of all. The Atocha, the largest sunken ship in the region, with a treasure worth more than $500 million, lying off the coast of Florida. The problem was that Fisher had no idea where to start. The Florida Keys stretched over 350 kilometers. Where should he search? Luckily, he obtained a copy of a document stating that the Atocha sank near the last island of Matacumbe. That island chain included 3 islands: Upper Matacumbe, Middle Matacumbe, and Lower Matacumbe. In 1968, Mel decided to focus all efforts there. For 3 years, he and his team developed theories about wind direction, ship drift, and where the wreck might have ended up. Hundreds of holes were dug with no results, not a single coin, not even a nail from the Atocha's hull. Slowly, the money from the 1715 treasure ran out, and Fisher began to doubt whether the Atocha was nothing more than a legend. Just as Fisher was losing hope, a coincidence changed everything. He met a historian specializing in Florida history named Eugene Lyon, who was traveling to Seville, Spain, to study documents for his PhD. Fisher asked him to inform him immediately if he found anything related to the Atocha. Amazingly, among millions of pages, Eugene found documents describing salvage operations on a ship named Santa Margarita, the sister ship of the Atocha, which sank in the same hurricane in 1622. One document was a first-hand testimony from a survivor describing how they saw the Atocha sinking before their eyes. Most importantly, the document specified the sinking location: the Marquesas Keys, known today as the Marquesas Islands, 160 kilometers away from where Fisher had been searching. For 3 years, they had been digging in the wrong place. As soon as the information arrived from Seville, Fisher moved all equipment and crew to the Marquesas Islands and began scanning the seabed with the magnetometer. They found strange objects, until they discovered the U.S. Navy had used the area as a bombing test range. More than 5,000 old bombs lay underwater. Every signal had to be checked, wasting enormous time, effort, and money. Expenses exceeded $200,000, and the team survived by fishing for food. Fisher realized he couldn't continue alone, and decided to take a crazy step, selling shares in a treasure he hadn't even found yet. With no physical proof, no one was interested. After months of searching, in the summer of 1971, after scanning more than 280,000 square meters of seabed, one diver surfaced, screaming with excitement. He had found a massive anchor underwater. It was an enormous Spanish anchor with a shaft over 5 meters long. Fisher immediately felt it was the Atocha. Around it, they found silver coins stamped with the seal of King Philip IV, dated between 1600 and 1621, perfectly matching the Atocha's sinking in 1622. The next morning, Fisher began clearing sand around the anchor. A diver spotted a thick gold chain nearly 2 meters long. It was tangible proof, enough to convince investors to fund further searches. Using anchor orientation, Fisher determined the ship had drifted southeast during the storm. The team began systematic searches in that direction, finding coins, a navigational astrolabe, and later large silver bars. In 1973, they found 1,460 Spanish silver coins, naming the site Bank of Spain. Soon after, they recovered 3 silver bars, each weighing 36 kilograms. Their serial numbers matched original Atocha records from the Seville archives. There was no doubt anymore. They had found the Atocha. Fisher offered a $10,000 reward for the first bronze cannon. In July 1975, his son Dirk followed his instincts and discovered 5 bronze cannons stacked together. That night, while celebrating, one of their boats sank, killing Dirk, his wife, and a diver. The joy turned into tragedy. For 2 months, they stopped everything. Then Fisher decided to continue, to fulfill his son's dream. 8 years passed with enormous costs, and no results until 1983, when Fisher's younger son Kane and diver Andy Matrokshi found a new path. On July 20, 1985, Andy discovered a wall of silver bars, 23 meters long, the main treasure of the Atocha. 16 years of searching had finally paid off. That date marked the anniversary of Dirk's death. Within months, more than 36 tons of gold and silver were recovered, along with 30 chests of coins and 350 emeralds. Mel Fisher continued working until his death in 1998. Convinced they had found only a small portion of the treasure, his family continues the search to this day, believing a 32-kilogram emerald chest remains hidden, possibly worth over $1 billion. And that is the end of the story, for now.